Hello, guys. So I want to continue our inquiry into the most unusual life of Dora van Gelder Kunz. So I already know you guys knew something was up with Dora. Why do we have a Dora the Explorer? Because Dora was involved in managing the production of Gullah Gullah Island. She was involved in managing the production of The Simpsons, of Beavis and Butthead. So the joke is not on me, it's on you. Because it is part of a circuit of a mastermind. So Dora, she was a master. And when you wake up to the reality, you see her achievement. She needs to be put in her correct place in history. That is why I have sent this information to the White House. And I feel in this duty that the intelligence threshold will be risen. So that means we are going to become smarter. We will become more educated. We will become the best parts of ourselves. So I want to read off to you so many important notes about Dora that I don't even know where to begin. So this is like an introduction to what like a book would be like, a second book on Dora. This book is subject to updates, but it is a good start. I do think it should be read widely by high school seniors, and it will get them ready for college. So, Dora Kunz and the Hidden War, Theosophy, Fascism, and the Esoteric Struggle Against Communism, 1917 to 1989. So 1917 was the Bolshevik Revolution, and 1989 was the fall of the Berlin Wall. History remembers wars fought with bullets and banners, but rarely does it illuminate the hidden conflicts waged in the shadows of ideology, spirituality, and mysticism, beneath the covert struggle between capitalism and communism that defined the 20th century. A far more arcane war was underway, a hidden war led by unseen forces of unconsciousness and ancient knowledge, all reaching a threshold. At the center of the spiritual crisis remained a hierarchy of elite spiritual warriors who stood as a resistance. Within this unlikely force, there was one little girl, Dora. Born in 1904 in Batavia, now Jakarta, in the outskirts of Jakarta, Dutch East Indies. Dora was a clairvoyant child prodigy raised amidst the colonial crossroads of theosophical mysticism and rising imperial tensions. While the world raged with revolution and calls for democratic reform and the struggle for monarchies to retain power, Dora assumed a powerful role within a nexus. Her life was to be forever entwined with the rise of fascism. The foundations of this esoteric occult doctrine that was so hidden and so mysterious and not fully understood, but became the most destructive ideology of the 20th century along with communism. Understanding that fascism came from the foundations of the esoteric world is the basis for this claim. In the reality of the rise of communism, there remained a call for a spiritual counter-offensive. Understanding this nexus within the Lewington, the Latin Balfour Montessori feud, we are now seeing that history is coming to a nexus of full awareness. We are part of this realization, orchestrating humanitarian efforts like the Helena Blavatsky soup kitchen that extended from Harbin, Vienna to Munich, where within this network of humanitarian, vegetarian served meals, She initiated a young Adolf Hitler into the Thule Society. Dora Kunz moved silently across continents and theosophical meetings with her laughter as a trail, where she was super mentored, but also she became a super mentor, forming alliances, giving counsel to those who wanted to connect with the other side, including those who recently lost loved ones during the Russian Civil War. She was sought within the aristocratic circles of the white emigres, who now were fleeing either to Harbin and there taking the railroads to Vienna and Munich. It is here that she developed close ties and personal relationships with so many who would become the leading women behind Hitler. I'm here to show you the reality that it is as the evidence stands. We must address who Dora was. Dora ended up controlling weapons of mass destruction. However, it is more complicated than it appears. It is as though Dora maintained her own wing of power within fascism. Therefore, even Hitler was not able to fully access the realms of her authority. That is why we can now fully understand why Hitler's most powerful weapons were not used. Dora didn't allow it. She wanted a safety hold for herself when the war went wrong. So understanding that Dora was in a higher echelon than Hitler. She was in a higher echelon than Stalin, because Stalin was initiated into this cult of Theosophy, and Mahatma letters were sent in exchange for human lives. Helena Roerich stood at the threshold. So, seeing that Dora is in this nexus of Maria Montessori, Helena Roerich, Wallace Simpson, Coco Chanel, and so many others, the Altai daughters were the junta, the coven of the most powerful women of the 1930s. So, understanding that this started so early on, that she was able to lay the groundwork not only for anti-communist fascism, but also for programs like MKULTRA, American surveillance, psychological infiltration of the arts, influence on medicine and human experimentation, development for the atomic bomb, including for de-escalation of nuclear weapons by being involved in panels such as Atoms for Peace. Dora was deeply involved in post-war psychological warfare. She worked in the shadows, she commanded from the shadows, and she remains in the shadows. Not for fame, but for infamy. Dora has no credit now, but what am I revealing to you? For me, Dora's power is in the achievement of capitalism over communism, where spirituality and the right to pursue religious travel remains, as well as the victory of the esoteric realm over scientific socialism. With Dora being born in the Dutch East Indies in the island of Java, now Indonesia, she was raised in a family steeped in theosophy. Her early life was defined by encounters with spiritual beings, fairies, angels, mystical visions. Hour-long meditation ceremonies were encouraged around the ages of 5. She had an overwhelming sense of having a mission. Being able to read the works of Kipling, where yes, the swastika was shown in children's books in the 1910s. So understanding that Dora was indoctrinated to use the swastika already when she was a child, because that was what children were seeing in literature at the time, such as the Jungle Book. Her father was closely connected to the Dutch colonial elite, He is directly involved in orchestrating the Armenian genocide. He had contact with the Telegraph network. This is enough to show, and I've done videos on this. This network spread into Europe and across Southeast Asia into the Middle East, where, again, arms were trafficked from the Dutch East Indies across the sands of Arabia to the Ottoman Empire with the rise of the Young Turks in order to orchestrate that Armenian genocide during World War I. Dora's awareness of this atrocity instilled with her a greater sense of humanitarianism on a surface that, even though her family was complicit, there was always a reason, understanding her perspective, that a Dutch genocide happened within the previous years. So a psychological sense of trauma and high alert. The atrocities committed against the Dutch in South Africa during the Boer War, 1904-1905. Also, the rising Dutch genocide during World War I, where Dutch were starved by the English. So you see a sense of Dora acting in a heightened militancy, but also understanding what occurred on Walpurgisnacht, where her direct professors were killed by communists who took power in Munich. Explaining how Maria Montessori used this as a leverage point to introduce anti-Semitism into the Lettian family and Dora. Because Maria Montessori used those little girls as leverage, and she did publicly showcase them in participating in a Thule Society funeral, and I have the photograph. There is forensic evidence of them holding wreaths of flowers and the letters S and the letter B. So what is assumed is that those young girls had to take on the responsibility of those murdered Thule Society members, including between up to a dozen individuals. Moving forward, with Dora being a child prodigy, at an early age she exhibited so-called clairvoyant and psychic abilities that caught the attention of Charles Ledbetter and Annie Besant, both towering figures within the Theosophical movement. She was brought into a secretary position in the League of Young Theosophists, where she organized meetings at a young age and called for Theosophy to dominate and take over as the leading spiritual denomination at the time. She truly had a utopian sense at a young age surrounding Theosophy, that in the 1920s she realized that she existed in the peripheral, but existed also at the center of power. This strange paradox would forever haunt Dora throughout her entire life. As she was to become a future strategist in propaganda and the maintaining of prohibition in the 1920s, Dora was deeply against alcohol. She was at the forefront of the temperance movement. She was deeply involved in the Oxford group. She was at the bedside of Bill Wilson when he was recovering from a relapse. She was the one who initiated the 12 Steps program that borrowed from Rosicrucianism. Because Dora is not written fully into the history, she is coded in different ways, and she does come up, she does appear in the literature, but she's not understood as the central point. Her letters during the time of World War I were those where she addressed coded references of people who walk in darkness, of the rising red tide of communism. These metaphors now appear to note early awareness that the Bolshevik threat would forever harm her and haunt her throughout her entire life. While still in her teens, Dora traveled to Europe, India, and the United States, forming esoteric alliances and learning how to operate within elite spiritual and political circles. More than a mystic, Dora became a seer, strategist, a moral interlocutor, a moral philosopher, a moral guide to political leaders of her time. She claimed her authority by receiving messages from higher beings, but also from a psychic precision, an ability to betray knowledge in such a precise and acute way. She possessed the ability to perceive the karmic destinies of entire nations. It was through these deep visions that she began to shape her most controversial doctrine, the development of fascism, as a metaphorical firewall against Bolshevik communism. With the awareness that Theosophy acted as a powerful counterforce against communism, in the wake of the Bolshevik Revolution, Theosophists began to flee the red tide, but they were also being actively imprisoned, and lodges were being closed. Freemasonry and Martinism was also being persecuted by the Bolsheviks. Dora was steeped in this fear that the spiritual world was under threat by this dangerous doctrine called communism. Dora Kunz, she took it as a serious, deadly threat. And this is the reality in which we walk in. But the feminist connection remains. It was so personal. The reason that Dora discovered Hitler was double-folded. Not only to stop the threat of communism, but also to address the situation of Lady Constance and to avenge her. That is a topic that is so central to this realization. Dora's efforts soon shifted eastwards in Harbin, China, Manchuria, a vital hub for white Russian immigrant exiles fleeing the Bolsheviks. She helped organize relief work, and she became known as the head operator of the Blavatsky soup kitchen network that extended from Harbin, Vienna to Munich. It is within this humanitarian corridor that Dora's achievement as the intelligence queen of anti-communism began. She became the central node of command, leading not only anti-communism, but also Theosophy as the basis for technological, scientific, and medical advancement. Understanding this responsibility and this bridging point, we now see the role that science begins to play already in the 1920s going into the 1930s as the final do-all and say-all. Everything in the name of science was Dora's command. Dora was obsessed with science. I cannot stress it enough. She was obsessed with science. She believed that science meant everything. And I know she meant a lot to spirituality, but she meant more to science. And that is because Dora was involved in the scientific community. She was involved in the medical community. She knew surgeon generals throughout her lifetime. She sat on the board of health. So her being in contact, it always was about science. And for that, many people did suffer, and I am so sorry. But we have to move forward and we have to talk about this. How this ideology of fascism came about. It sought its justification in science, not only in stopping communism. The sad reality of anti-Semitism remains in how the Holocaust happened and millions of people died, millions of Jews. I'm sorry, but I'm showing you how it happened. Dora was not naive. Dora understood that energies can work in a powerful way, and she released volatile, catastrophic energy. She believed that only through total opposition to communism that science can prevail. Her vision was that fascism was like an accident that she had to create in a crisis. It was like, almost like a curse. It is from here in the shadows of the Blavatsky soup kitchen network extending from Harbin all the way to Munich, the corridors of her power began as she continued to be a leader in theosophical meetings. Her correspondents were sympathetic to esotericism that did shine and echo examples of Ariosophy, such as archetypal guardianship and blood memory purification, which circulated her early Thule Society meeting circles and rural societies that were held in Vienna and Munich hotels. It is here that she began to show herself as a gifted esotericist amongst the aristocratic elite with waning power, with the rise and the fear of World War I. Dora's war was not one of enemies merely, and not one of merely of armies, but of energetic architecture, of building an etheric network, of using the occult world to attain success. The four-season meetings and the birth of the Thule doctrine. Likely that Dora met Hitler outside a four-season hotel in Munich. We see a nexus point of occult thinkers, exiled aristocrats, runaway vagabonds, searching for meaning and purpose, and seeking that through the means of acting as esoteric diplomats, because that was Hitler's upcoming. So with Hitler entering into the Thule sphere, Dora made a man out of him amongst other women, including Bechstein. It is here that Hitler began his days as a fiery orator, being the one to further the cause of freeing India, of freeing Ireland, of espousing vegetarianism, of bringing in occultism as part of a synarchy political doctrine. It is here that we see in certain newspaper shareholder documents listed Dora Kunz. Yes, a strange name with an E at the end. Still understanding how this happened is a matter of historical investigation. Was there a previous madam allowing a younger Dora to take this up into her own responsibility? Or were they using another obscure name that later benefited them, knowing that Kunz was already in the theosophical circuit, a Fritz Kunz, that Dora met when she was already 9 years old? This strange connection was beneficial to Dora and a means of income, because it acted as a stakeholder esoteric threshold, and this was applied by Hitler's girlfriend. The same methodology. Given that they used this newspaper shareholder methodology as an esoteric pipeline, it is not just eyewitness testimony, it is forensic, it is documented. We see them achieving financial success as the years goes by and as the newspapers sell and as the anti-Semitism is portioned out. It is a sad reality. Further, it is believed that Dora brought out more of Hitler's vegetarianism, his interest in astrology, his interest in occult symbolism, his use of initiation ceremonies, his interest in occult literature, seeing him not just as a political figure, but as a vessel through which metaphysical war could be embodied on Earth. She showed him that he was part of a mystical lineage of Germanic mythology, Vedic cosmology, and Aryan symbolism, and Zarathustrian calling, all mixed into one. Not as a mere racial dogma, but rather as a metaphysical embodiment of a higher civilizational archetype and rebirth. She began developing what would be called the doctrine of Thule, the Thule doctrine, an esoteric political framework that merged apocalyptical cosmology with racial mysticism, karma with blood and spiritual purity, and nationalist fire. Dora herself remained behind the scenes, guiding ideological refinement, selecting key Thule figures, and ensuring the spiritual tone stayed aligned with her vision. To Dora, Hitler was a useful flame, a tool to be commanded, a strong man to stop this rise of communism, but also to get back at Balfour for imprisoning the friends of the aunt of her friends, the Lettian sisters, who watched their aunt decline over the years from the torture and the force feedings. That not only her experience, but many other feminists. It is within this understanding that we see Dora, we humanize her, we better understand history. But I am no supporter of fascism. I am no supporter of communism. Both remain highly dangerous doctrines. But we must understand where they came from, because this will raise intelligence and this will better understand how it was possible. The detail, the day-by-day appropriation of something like the swastika is so intricately connected into history because you see so many different facets of its display across different aspects. Not only looking at Dora's letters, but looking at her travel log, looking at her meetings, looking at her rise to power, and her nexus of who she was connected to, we see that she will forever remain the reason why so much has been hidden up until now. So thank you. I know that was very passionate, but it's so important. So thank you. I'm an open secret society historian, and I hope you can appreciate the immense biography and so much more information to come.